Well, after 5 highly suspenseful seasons, Bates Motel has finally come to an end, but how did it all end? Let's find out. Hey guys, remember the series finale of Bates Motel, Season 5, Episode 10, The Cord. And guys, obviously, I was very much looking forward to this episode, and mainly because the fact that, because this show, for the first few seasons, we thought this show was going to be a prequel. We really did. We thought it was going to follow the Psycho storyline, and it was going to take us, into where Psycho began. But as we know, ever since last season, they really altered a lot of events, and because of them doing that, I really didn't know where we were going to go in this finale. I really didn't know what direction it was going to take us, and damn was this good. I mean, to me, this was as satisfying a finale as we possibly could get. It was definitely a lot more shocking than I thought it was going to be. I really did love this finale overall. I think it was extremely well done. I think there were a lot of things here that, we finally got a lot of closure. They really closed out everything, except for one arc, but I can understand why I didn't really do anything with it. But other than the very last, 3 minutes, I really didn't have many other problems with this finale. But let's just get into this episode, because I definitely do want to talk about, like I said, a lot did go down, and, overall, I was very impressed by the way things turn out. But we start off and we start right where the last episode left off, where we see Norm and Romero are riding in the back of a car driven by Regina, who I was wrong. It was not Julia. It was Regina, who is in fact the secretary, and she's crying. And I like that she is asking Romero, why are you doing this? Because he knows Regina. I mean, this used to be one of the people that he worked with, and I think that's one of the things that's so sad about the direction Romero has taken. He used to be very well respected in this community, as we know. This used to be where he worked, and everyone respected him very much here. And now he's really just turned them aside and started to turn on them, and she is begging Romero not to kill her. She's sobbing, and I like that Romero actually tells her to get out of the car, because, I mean, he has no beef with her. There's no reason that he needs to do, that he needs to hurt her, so I thought it was smart of him to tell her to get out of the car. I know people say Romero is not exactly taking the smartest route, and I would definitely agree with that. I mean, what he did was definitely not the smartest idea. You're not going to beat Norman Bates. It's just not going to happen. But they continue driving, and the police watch a video of Romero, Norman, and Regina getting into the car, and they issue a bulletin to be on the lookout for them. And Sheriff Green calls Dylan to let him know that Norman has been kidnapped by Romero, and she's mainly concerned about Regina. She doesn't really care so much about Norman, which is understandable. I mean, Norman's never really been that much of a concern to her. She's been suspicious of him from the beginning, so she really doesn't care what happens to him. So Romero and Norman then arrive at the spot, and I thought that was definitely very well done, the way all of that was laid out. And you can tell, once again, Dylan's doing whatever he can to try to make sure that Norman is okay, and make sure that Norman is, in fact, released from everything that goes down. But you can just tell, again, the sheriff just does not care. If he's gonna die, so be it. As long as Regina is intact, and as long as everything's fine with her, that's all Sheriff Green really cares about. And I've said it before, unlike Romero, she doesn't really have a personal connection to Norm. So if something bad happens to him, that's his fault. It's not hers. She really had nothing to do with it. And, well, because of that, she does not really care if something bad happens to Norman, which, again, I think is completely understandable, and I thought that was definitely very well laid out. And I like that Dylan is really the one who's trying to help out Norman here. Like, he's trying to do what he can to make sure that Norman is, in fact, okay, because he knows deep down that Norman is not a bad person. And as we know, this isn't really Norman right now. This is, in fact, Mother in his head telling Romero what to do, and he very well can tell it's, he at first thinks that this is a joke. He thinks that Norman's joking around. He thinks that Norman is just, basically fucking with him, and he's not taking any bullshit from Norman. He definitely is not taking any bullshit from him. You can understand why he was doing that. I thought that was definitely very well done the way this all turned out. So eventually, after, Norman tells Romero that he really doesn't know where it is, they eventually do arrive at the spot where Norman has buried Norma, and, Romero, he's not playing any tricks here. He's like, look, find her body, or I'm going to make sure things are a lot worse for you, and he means it, and you can tell that Norman, even though it's not really Norman, his mother, she's not necessarily intimidated by it, but at the same time, she knows that Romero definitely means business, and, she can't really win here, because she doesn't really know where the body is, so basically, he digs and finds her body. Norman apologizes to Romero and tells him he knows how much he loved her, and Romero then starts beating Norman because he basically gives him two choices. One, I can either kill you after this and make it be quick and painless, or I can make you suffer, and I have many ways of doing that. So he then goes to Norma's body, declares his love to her, and I thought this was a really nice scene. We are reminded of how much this body really means to Romero, and how he really does care about Norma, and how important that body really is to him. I thought that was definitely really well done. I really love the way the entire scene turned out, because again, that's just that one shred of humanity that's really left in Romero. All he's cared about all season is Norma. That's it. Nothing else. He cares about going to Norma's body, making sure she's okay, and he doesn't really care about anything else. So as he's distracted, Norman hits Romero over the head with a rock. He shoots him, and as Romero dies, he tells Norman that he killed his own mother and he can't hide from it. And yeah, Romero's dead, which I really was not that surprised about. I pretty much thought Romero was going to die. I really did not think he was going to get out of this, because, I mean, as much as he wanted to believe it, you can't take down Norman Bates. You just can't. There's too much that's happened in his life, and he just, even though he wanted to, I don't think he could have killed Norman all the way. I think definitely, I just don't think that it would have been possible to do such a thing. I think even if he really wanted to, I don't really think he would have been able to kill him, unfortunately. I think, deep down he really wanted to, but I just don't think that he would have been able to get out of this, by killing Norman Bates. I don't think he would have gotten out of this alive. So at this point, though, I was kind of confused, because while I definitely expected for Romero to die, I did not expect him to die this early in the episode. We're only 16 minutes into the episode at this point, and I was very surprised that Norman killed Romero as early as he did, or rather, Mother killed Romero as early as she did. But it really does make a lot of sense. Again, I mean, these were the two people who loved Norma the most, and they would sacrifice anything for her. And for her to kill Romero, it makes sense, because again, that was the last way she could cover up and help Norman. So it makes sense the way this next scene turns out. We see Mother, she appears to Norman and tells him to not listen to Romero. He's just trying to hurt Norman, and Norman tells her that he thinks he did kill her, but he didn't want to. And I love it, he finally realizes that, yeah, I killed her, and that's just kind of the way it went. But he, deep down, he didn't want to kill her, but that he did, and that's just kind of the way it turned out. And, she was really all he had, and Mother tells him goodbye, actually. Yeah, she leaves him here, and he knows everything now. There's really nothing for her to protect him from. There's really no reason for him to continue, going about this. So she ends up leaving, and he knows everything now, and there's really nothing for her to protect him from, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, remember, the only reason that Mother was there is because he was having these blackouts, and because of the fact that he was constantly giving in to her own lies. But now that he knows the truth about everything, there is no reason to have this alternate personality, which I thought was honestly really well done. But what was even more surprising to me, not just the fact that Mother left, but what ends up happening next, because essentially, Norman then kind of gets to restart his entire life. He wakes up in his bed, and we see Mother is talking to him, which was very strange. I didn't really understand why this was happening, but he tells her he had this horrible dream that she died, and Norma says, and it's not Mother's point, it's Norma. Norma says, which is a nightmare, then she makes breakfast, and we quickly realize this is from the first episode. I mean, they're literally reenacted some scenes from the first episode, which I thought was a really clever way of just showing how far we've really come, and how innocent Norman really was in the beginning. And, basically, Norman says it's just a nightmare, then she makes breakfast. Norman really wakes, but then we see Norman really actually does wake up, and he's in the snow at Norma's burial side, and he sees Romero dead next to him, realizing that he actually did have something to do with this, which, I mean, I thought, again, was a very well done scene. I love the way that played out, and, Norman flashes back to Norma, telling him that they're moving, they're starting a new life, and he drives back to the motel, replaying the first time he and Norma actually arrived. And again, this whole scene was just so well done, realizing that finally, he is going back to the motel, and he's remembering all of this stuff, and he carries Norma's body into the house, tells her he believes that everything is really going to be okay, and this is when we see that Norman Bates that we have really been waiting for. I know a lot of people have said this season that they've really steered away from that side of Norman Bates, traits, but I really think we got that side in this episode, because at this point, Norman is kind of believing that Norma's alive. I think deep down he knows she's actually dead, but he just wants to believe that for his own sanity. He can't bear that he actually killed her. He needs Norma in his life somehow, and he can't possibly go on without her, and I think that's something that this episode presented quite nicely. It's just that whole idea that Norman really needs Norma by his side at all times, or else he just can't really be by himself. He needs her. He needs that cord. Remember in the first episode, he always says there's a cord between us, and that's really what that figurative cord is really about here, is that it's the cord that really brings these two together, that really ties them together forever, and Norman can't really be without her. And it's crazy to think, but that's really what I think this episode was really trying to show, and I think they really did capture that quite well in this final episode. I really did love the way this entire thing was done. I never really thought of something like this happening, but it really does make sense, because Norman does need Norma in his life. So for him to literally go back in the first episode, not only showed how far he'd come, but also shows, the journey that he's taken, and really how, how unstable he is without her by his side. So we then see a very surprising return where Dylan meets with Remo. Yeah, remember Remo, the guy that he worked in that drug business with? Now, I was at first confused because we haven't really seen Remo since season 3, so I thought that Remo really was kind of a goner, but it made sense why we finally saw him again. If you remember, Remo never died. He was really the only one left that didn't leave town. So the fact that he did go to Remo, I think really did make a lot of sense, because not only did he go to Remo in this instance, not just to, not just to, like, substantiate with him, catch up and everything. You can tell he needs a gun. He's getting the gun for a specific purpose. You don't exactly know why he wants that gun, but I thought it made a lot of sense to go back to Remo, because it really does show how much Dylan has really changed. He used to be in that drug business. He used to be part of that gang, but the way that he's been able to get his life together and not have to go back to that drug business, and now having to go back to them, I thought was definitely very well handled. I thought that whole scene was definitely really well done, and there's a lot of instances where you don't know why he's going to use that gun, but I thought all of that was definitely setting up, for the show, for the last scene very well. Sheriff Green finds Regina and questions her about what exactly went down, and, she doesn't really have any questions, because, what does Regina know? All she knows is that she was held hostage, and that Norman and Romero went to the body and things like that. She doesn't really know what went down. So Norman then puts his mother into her nightgown, lays her in her bed, and he goes to the motel office, and he takes down the police tape. So he does literally everything he can to try to start over, to just try to make this motel, he wants to make this motel seem welcoming. He doesn't want to have to hide, any of the crime scene. He doesn't want under quarantine. He just wants to start over. Unfortunately, he can't do that, and we see this woman and her 2 children arrive, and they rent a room, and one of her children's name actually happens to be named Dylan. And Norman is his usual cheery self, but at this point you can tell that this is not the same Norman we've been with all season. He's a lot more dour. He's not as up to date with what's really going on. You can tell he's in and out of reality, and that's something that is a big part of this episode, is that he really is very in and out on what's going on, which I thought was definitely, again, very well handled. It made a lot of sense why he was so in and out, because, again, he just can't be himself without Norma. He needs that Norma by his side, and without her, he's not really sane, which I honestly, I think did make a lot of sense there. So, basically, he opens up this motel, and Dylan, meanwhile, is at a bar. He's getting a drink in a bar. This woman starts to talk to him, and you don't know what's going to happen, because it seems like him and Emma's relationship is pretty much kaput. Like, it's just not really going to happen anymore. We saw Emma a few times in this episode, but we only saw what we needed to of her, because, again, she's not really that much in Dylan's life anymore. You kind of feel like their relationship's over, because there is a scene where he does call her, and we'll get into that, but basically he gets a call from Norman, and Norman tells him that they're at the new house and motel, and basically, Dylan, he wants to try to help out Norman. Now that he knows that Norman is okay, he's like, all right, I'll show up, but he starts to get a bit creeped out by what Norman says next, because Norman also tells him that he and Norma miss him, and Dylan's like, what the fuck? Norma's dead. How do you know that Norma's dead? Why are you saying that she's alive? And so he asks him to come for dinner, and Dylan at this point, he's just very confused. He has no idea how Norman can believe that Norma's actually alive. After all that they've been through, and after everything that's went down, how can he possibly think that Norma's alive? I mean, it seems completely inconceivable. There's no way that Norma's actually alive. He knows obviously that Norman is very much does need help at this point. So he asks if he's with Romero, but Norman says he doesn't know Romero. So again, he's completely erased that from his memory. It's almost as if it didn't happen. Like, he's ignoring it. Like, he just can't believe that Romero, that he was with Romero, because he can't believe that he actually killed Norma. If Norma's alive, then there was no Romero standoff, because why else would there be Romero standoff? He doesn't know Romero. He's trying to erase that from his mind. And I saw this is not Norman losing it. This is him completely just kind of pretending it didn't happen. Like, he doesn't want to believe that it happened because he is so in and out of consciousness, and basically, he has fully lost this point. You can tell he's fully lost it, and I thought it was definitely very well handled the way it's all done, and it really does get us to the very big, but very inevitable climax this episode. And at this point, there really is no hiding it. I mean, Dylan's done everything he can to try to, to try to make matters better and try to help Norm. But at this point, there really is no hiding it. His brother is insane, and he really needs to do what he can to bring him down, because there really is no other way to stop him. We see that Norman, again, he's just completely in and out, and you don't know if he's in reality or out reality. Again, I think, me personally, I believe that Norman does know what's going on, but he's just trying to hide from it. He wants to believe that things were better. He's thinking back to times when things were better, and that's really why he is so out of touch with what's going on at this point. So Norman then puts on this Doris Day record. He sets the table for dinner, which coincidentally was the same record from The Man Who Knew Too Much. Remember that movie I reviewed a couple weeks ago? It was actually the same song from that, but you guys don't care about that. He dresses his mother's body, and he carries her to the dinner table, and again, he fully believes at this point that she's alive. He's treating her like she's actually there. Like, she's kind of helpless, but he is treating her like she's actually alive. It's really insane to think about, but again, Norman's just not on that, level where he's been all season. It seemed like he was starting to believe what was going on. He had a very good idea what was going on, but at this point, he was just kind of lost. Like, he really could not be sane without her, and he needed to believe that she was alive for his own good. Like, he couldn't be without her, and it was just really sad to think about here, because you wanted to believe, that things are going to get better here, and that he is going to believe that Norma's dead and things like that, but deep down that's just not going to happen anymore, and it's just, again, it's really sad to think about the way this all went. But I love this next scene between Dylan and Emma, because like I said, there wasn't a lot with them. You didn't know if that relationship really was there, and Dylan still doesn't really know if it's there, because he does call Emma before he goes in, just to fill her in on what's going in, and she makes this call very abrupt, because she just doesn't know if she can really have a relationship with Dylan right now. I mean, she tells him straight out, don't do anything stupid, don't do anything you regret, and he says, I know I have a daughter, but do I have a wife? And she doesn't really say anything, because he asks if she loves him, but she doesn't really answer, and she tells him he has to call Sheriff Green, but he refuses. He's going to do this on his own terms, because Sheriff Green, and he's right, Sheriff Green does not care about Norman. He's really the only person who does. Emma doesn't, because that part of Norman that she really cared about is gone. I mean, that care, that devotion, just that great best friend that she used to have is completely gone. And I think deep down, she did care about Norman, but now she's just at a point where, Norman is not who he used to be, and this is not the same Norman that she was friends with all of those years ago. And again, it really does show where those characters have gone. Dylan is really the only one who still cares about Norman. So basically, he goes to the motel, but not before telling the woman who checked in that she and her kids are not safe. They need to leave right away, and luckily she does act quickly. I didn't know if she was actually going to comply, because it seemed like they were very comfortable there, but luckily in the end she does comply. She gets the hell out of there, and basically Norman hugs Dylan. He enters the house and says that Mother will be happy to see him, and Dylan's very confused. I mean, how is Mother there? She's obviously dead, so how the hell is Mother still alive? And he tries to tell him that Norman's not there, but Norman motions to the dining room, and again, Dylan doesn't really understand what's going on. At first, it's just them catching up on, what's happened. Dylan is trying to get Norman to come back to reality, but it just doesn't seem to be working. And what Dylan sees, I mean, was so well done. He sees Norma's dead body, and he throws up as he sees Norma sitting at the table. And I love that Dylan at this point was the audience. Like, he was reacting the way that we were. And I thought that was extremely well done, the way they handled that here. He sees Norma sitting at the table, and Norman talks as if Norma's alive. Like, oh, she cooked this dinner, and she's very happy to see you. Maybe you two can make amends. We know you're the only person who really cares about, that doesn't really care about her and things like that. So Dylan is yelling at Norman that Norma's dead, and I love that there is no rationalizing anything. Like, he's yelling at him at this point because he just can't do that anymore, and I love the way that was all handled, and basically, this is the last straw. I mean, Norman suggested that Dylan was just sick or in shock over their move to Oregon, or simply overexcited at being reunited. Remember, in Norman's mind, he is essentially starting over. And if you remember back in the beginning of the show, Dylan was his estranged brother. He wasn't someone who he's seen in a long time. So Norman's really playing this up like he hasn't seen Dylan in years, rather than, just a couple of weeks. Which, yeah, he hasn't seen him in 2 years, but he's acting like he's never really been a part of his family, and that all of that stuff that happened in the show, didn't happen in Norman's mind. Again, I think he's just kind of doing that to protect himself, which I thought was definitely interesting as seeing, but Dylan attempts to bring him back to the real world and trying to do what he can to get him to wake up. And this is why I believe that Norman was, in fact, just trying to do this for his own good and just his own benefit, just to keep himself calm. Because he tells Dylan, don't ruin it. He can't believe that Norma's actually alive. He knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. He knows very well what's going to happen. But again, it's just better for him to believe that Norma's actually alive. So basically, he wants him to get help and he wants him to be happy. And I like that. I like that Dylan tells him, he wants him to just get his life together, because that's something that Norman doesn't seem to be able to do, and he wants to be able to finally move on from that. But Norman then grabs a large kitchen knife, and the second he put that down, I'm like, oh shit, I know exactly what's going to happen. He moves towards Dylan, and he tells Dylan he can't let Dylan take him away from Norma. Norman just wants to be with Norma. That's all he wants. So he lunges at Dylan, and he asks him if this is really how it all ends. And Dylan pulls out that gun, and you realize he didn't get that gun from Remo just to get it from him, but he got it because he wanted to be, he wanted in case he needed to do something to Norman, in case Norman, he just couldn't get through to him. So basically, he says he just wants to be with her, and with that, he charges at his brother, and I didn't think that this was actually going to work. The second Dylan took out the gun, I'm like, this is not going to work, but no, Norman actually lodges the knife into the wall, and a lot of people have talked about this with the knife and everything, and, they noticed that Norman lodged into the wall. Did he do this purposely, or did he just miss? And I think deep down he really did it personally, because he knew this was really the only true way he could be with Norma, and in probably the most tragic scene in the show, besides Norma dying, obviously, Dylan takes out the gun, and he actually does shoot Norman before he does stab him, and it's just a really sad scene, but you honestly feel really happy that finally someone was able to put Norman down. It was really the only person left who had any shred of hope in him and had any shred of humanity when it came to Norman. He actually really did care for him, and deep down he didn't want to do it, but he was really the only one who could bring Norman up to speed on what's actually really going on. He really had to break Norman to do that, and it really is as saddening, but I think it's as satisfying a scene as we could possibly get, because Norman is reunited with Norma. I thought that was all very well done, the way that was handled. I think it was very sad to see. This was really the inevitable end, though. I mean, like I said, once we knew that things were going to be different. We didn't know if Dylan was actually going to die. Dylan could have very well died, but I don't think it would have been nearly as satisfying as Norman finally being reunited with Norma in heaven. She's waiting with open arms. They're going to now be together. I thought that was an extremely well done scene. I thought it was a very good way to close things out, but it's not the last scene of the episode. And everything about this scene was just so well orchestrated. Just from the second that Dylan walked in, I love that they really did take their time with this scene. I mean, really to show how great the show handles suspense. They didn't just right away have Norman pick up that kitchen knife. It wasn't until Dylan told him that he just can't believe in something that's not true. That was the line that really did trigger Norman, and I love the way that that was the thing that really brought down Norman's downfall. Finally, someone is telling him that you can't believe what you want to. Romero had no idea what was going on. Emma didn't really either. Dylan finally got it, that he knew that Norman was, in fact, believing that Norma was alive, and he knew that Norman just couldn't believe that anymore, and it makes sense why he was the one to finally bring him down. I think that's what was so well shown with this scene. because before the show ends, we get this montage, which I didn't really love, to be honest with you. I didn't love the way this was all done. We see the sheriff, she finds Romero's body, they drag it away, probably going to, you know, close the case because Norman's obviously dead, so there's nothing else she can really do. A realtor shows the couple with the motel with a for sale sign in the window. They're probably going to they're probably going to renovate the hotel, make it better, things like that. So it seems like that the motel is going to live on, but all the evil within it does die. I'm hoping that that's what that means. But Dylan and Emma actually do kiss at the very end. We see Dylan runs up to Emma and his daughter, I can't think of her name right now, but they are waiting for him with open arms. And that was really the only thing I didn't believe, is that after all of this, it really seemed like Dylan and Emma's relationship was kind of over, but this didn't really seem that way. It seemed like they actually are getting back to the reality, and, you know, it seems like they are actually going to be back in a good place, and that the relationship actually is going to live on. That was the one thing I just didn't really believe here, but I did love that our final scene here was the headstone of Norman and Norma. I think that was perfectly done the way that was handled, because, you know, they did in fact get to die side by side, and I love the way that was all done. But that's how the show ends. Really great finale overall. But let's just get into this finale and how I was overall satisfied with the show and talk about the show as a whole. So overall, guys, a really damn good finale. I was very impressed with the way that this all did turn out. Just from everything from the closure with Romero. The fact they did kill Romero in the first half of the episode. At first, I didn't understand, like, why do you have to kill Romero that early? But it really does make sense. Romero and Norman were the two men who would do anything for Norma, and if anyone got in the way of that, they just couldn't possibly see a way of living anymore. That was the one thing. I remember, the one thing that kept Romero going after these 2 years, while he was in prison, while his career was basically destroyed after all he's done, was Norma. That was the only thing that really kept him motivated, and if he was able to, you know, get revenge, then he would be okay with finally, with finally dying. And remember what he said to Norman, that you're never going to be able to live with this, and that this is never going to leave you. And in the end, that is what happened. It did not leave Norman. Norman, in fact, did believe that Norma was alive. And again, I don't think he did it because he was in and out of consciousness. A lot of people said that, but I don't think that's what it was. I think he just did that because he can't see a foreseeable future without Norma. And I think that's why Dylan had to kill him. Like, in that instance, there was no other way for this to go on. Dylan had to be the one to bring him down. I think that was extremely well handled, the way they chose that, because Dylan was really the only one who was rational in this world. He was the one person who wanted to get his life together, move away from all that, and have a good life. And, you know, he's gotten that. He's found a way to turn his life around and be happy and have this nice, simple life with Emma and his daughter. And it seemed like that was kind of crumbled, though. And the only thing, like I said, that really did kind of annoy me about this finale was the very last, was the way it ended, with him going back to Emma and his daughter. I just didn't find that to be that realistic. I mean, it didn't really seem like she cared that much about it. Remember that phone call? She said point blank, she didn't, when he asked her, do you love me? She didn't say anything. So I didn't really understand, I'm sure his daughter would be there, but why would Emma be welcoming him back with open arms? I didn't fully understand. I get it that obviously he killed Norman, but I just didn't feel like things are going to be as okay as the ending really made it seem. I feel like this is something that's going to haunt Dylan all his life. He's not ever going to be the same way that he was, and maybe that may be true, but I just didn't really feel like they showed that as well as they could in this final episode. In that last scene, I just felt they could have maybe shown just a little bit more of how much this is really going to haunt Dylan, and how even though Norman's gone, the whole, shred of Norman is never really going to leave him. I'm hoping that, I wish that they would have ended like that, because the show never was a show really about hope. And I get it that Dylan has gotten his life together, and he has tried to find a way to move away from all that, but I just didn't feel like Emma would be as welcoming as she really was. Besides that, guys, I was very impressed with the way this finale turned out. I think it really was as perfect as it really could have been. I don't really think they could have handled it, honestly, any better than they did. And I'm absolutely going to give Bates Motel, this episode of Bates Motel, the final episode, Season 5, Episode 10, The Cord, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. Like I said, very close to an A+, but because of that final scene, that's really the only thing that didn't make me give it one. But overall, I was very impressed with the way it's turned out. It was a different kind of finale than I expected, but I don't really think it could have done it any better than it really really was. But with that said, guys, now let's talk about the season as a whole, because to be honest with you guys, yes, I did love the season. No, I don't think it's nearly as good as last season. Last season was when most of the main events went down, such as Romero's downfall, him losing his job, him trying to be this husband to Norma, him trying to be that father figure in Norman's life, but Norman pushing him away, him slowly realizing who Norman really was, Dylan moving away from them. All of that really did go down last season. I think last season still is the best season of the show, but this season comes really damn close to it. I mean, there was a lot of great stuff about this season, especially with Mother and Norman. They took a lot more chances with that relationship, and the fact that we're able to keep Vera Farmiga on, I thought was a very smart choice. She was always such a big part of this show. She always provided us with such great emotion and such great depth. So to have this more silly version of Mother, who just didn't really care and was kind of living life with no consequences, was really, I think, a very astute choice. It made sense why I decided to do that. But I think the smartest thing that this final season did is that it didn't go the Psycho route. Everyone thought it was going to go the Psycho route. I even thought at the end of last season it was going to. But I'm glad they didn't. They didn't kill Marion Crane. They killed someone different than Marion Crane. They killed her, they killed her lover. And I thought that was really well handled the way that all played out. And sure, some people may be like, well, why didn't we see Madeline? We already need to see Madeline. Her life is destroyed. I mean, she's not going to be happy with Dylan. There's really nothing else they could have shown with Madeline. So I'm not upset that they didn't show Madeline. Sure, they maybe could have given her a little bit more because she was such a big part of this season. But I think we got what we needed to with her. We didn't need to see any more from her. We didn't really need to see a lot of Emma either. Last episode was kind of Emma's, episode, so it made sense why it played out the way it did. And I like the way the show did find ways to keep Dylan and Emma on the show. I remember last season I was telling you guys, I don't really know if those characters are going to be on next season. I just thought the season was going to be, Norman and Romero. I thought that was going to be the entire season, but damn was I wrong. I mean, they really did find a way to keep Dylan and Emma and make them still an integral part of the story. Not just have them be on the show, but have them be a big part of the story. And I was very happy with the way that all turned out. I think they handled that very well here. And especially with Emma, because Emma was that one character, like I said, that throughout the last 2 seasons hasn't really gotten a lot. But they really did give her a lot in this final season. I was happy with the way all of that turned out. And I think as a whole, this was a very satisfying final season. My only real complaints with this final season is that just compared to last season, there wasn't as much happening here, and that I do think that this season might have benefited more if they did have 8 episodes instead of 10. I know that obviously they had 10 episodes every single season, but I just feel like this particular season, they could have done 8 episodes. I think there were just 2 episodes that they really didn't need, those being 3 and 4. You could have combined 3 and 4 into one episode. You honestly really could. And I think, well, actually, 4 and 5, I'd say would be. You can combine episodes 4 and 5 into one episode, and I think that would have honestly help them. I think they could have just done 8 episodes, and I would have been completely fine with that. If they did 8 episodes, I think they could have easily told that story. But overall, guys, I was very impressed with the way this final season turned out. When all is said and done, I definitely am going to miss this show, and I'm definitely going to give Bates Motel Season 5 as a whole a 4.5 out of 5 or an A-. Overall, guys, I was very happy with the way this final season turned out. They found a way to keep this show going when it seemed like there really wasn't a way to continue it, especially with them killing Vera Farmiga. They found a way to preserve her. They kept all the characters still an integral part of the story, and they didn't try to change anything. They tried to turn Norman around, but they didn't try to change the show in any way. It was a different type of story, but I think for this final season, it worked quite well. I think it definitely made sense to close out the show. It's a show that I remember I came in, I'm like, Bates Motel prequel, I don't really know if that's going to work, but this is one of those shows that, was one of the first shows I ever reviewed to you guys, and, throughout the seasons, I think it's gone progressively better as it goes on, with these last 3 seasons definitely being the best of the bunch, in my opinion. I think these, especially the last 2, have definitely been the strongest for the show. The visuals got better, the horror got better, the suspense really got better, just the way to tell the story, they really understood what works so well, and in the end, the story really was a love story, because Norman did get to be with Norma, and it really is this twisted love story if you really do think about it, and I think this episode really did show that. It was really as satisfying a final season as it could possibly be. I'm definitely going to miss this show, but I was very happy with the way the show did close out for one last hurrah. I think overall it was really as satisfying as it could possibly be. And sure, there are definitely other things I could have complained about, like a lot of the characters here, like, for example, Sheriff Green, Madeline, even Marion Crane were very much just characters that needed to be in the story. But honestly, I think that's really all they need to be. I don't really think they needed to develop them any more than they did. Madeline was a lot more developed than I think they could have. They easily could have made her just this, love interest type character that Norman pursues and doesn't have much of a personality. But no, they made her a lot more. She was a very complex person who deep down did care for, she definitely did care for Loomis and everything. She definitely did care for him, but deep down she knew that he was cheating, and that storyline I thought was just very well done. It made us care a lot more for her, and they did a lot more with her character than I think they easily could have. And even Sheriff Green, who wasn't just the detective in this show, she was a lot, or the sheriff, she was a lot smarter then they really brought her on to be. Stam, that was his name. They made her a lot smarter than she really was. She catched on to Norman more, and that was something that Romero never really did. He always saw the good in Norman, and I think that's something else they did really well this season. They really altered a lot of that. Like I said, they told a much smaller scale type story, but I think that really did help them because they had to subsequently revamp the show, but also do it temporarily, and it was really good to get basically a 10-episode type miniseries with this show, and I think that's something else that really did pay off in this final season. But overall, guys, that's it. Bates Motel is finally over. I can't believe that the show ended as quickly as it did. But like I said, you guys, in the coming months, there are going to be a lot of shows that are ending. The Leftovers, Pretty Little Liars, Girls Already Ended, Swish to Birth. And, there are going to be a lot of series finales we're going to be talking about. So it's pretty crazy how many shows are really ending this year. There are definitely a lot that are going to be coming to an end. But let me know what you guys thought of this finale. Loved your thoughts, and sorry it took me so long to review it. I just didn't really have the time yesterday, to be honest with you guys. Didn't have time really till today. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, which I don't know what it's going to be for because I am going on a Virginia trip tomorrow for like 4 days for choir and things like that. So I don't know when exactly I'll be able to get reviews out, but whatever it is, I will see you guys for that. It might be for the Leftovers. I'm not exactly sure. Whatever it is, I just know that there are not going to be any other reviews this week. I'm just not really going to have the time. I'm sorry about that, guys, but I want to be able to at least get this review because the show did end, and you guys aren't really going to care for a series finale review next week, so I figured I might as well get this out now. But I will see you guys for whatever my next video is, and hope you guys enjoyed my Bates Motel reviews over the past few years. I know they were some of my first reviews. Some of them are really, really hard watching back, honestly, definitely, but I definitely have loved reviewing the show. I'm definitely going to miss it very much. But that's for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you guys for whatever my next video is. Okay, bye.